Sagittarius, you are about to lose something precious. Open your eyes. Sagittarius, take a slow breath with me. There is something I need to tell you gently, yet truthfully, because your spirit deserves nothing less than honesty spoken with compassion. In this season of your life, a soft warning is rising around you like a quiet wind, one you may have sensed but brushed aside, thinking you'd return to it later. But later is beginning to fade. Something precious is slipping through the spaces of your busy days, dissolving not because you don't care, but because your attention has been stretched thin between responsibilities, expectations, and the constant pressure to be strong for everyone at once. That is why this moment matters. If you feel a subtle ache, a tug in your chest, a strange awareness that you might be overlooking something or someone, your intuition isn't imagining it. Your soul is whispering, hoping you will pause long enough to truly hear. And while you're here with me listening, let this be a sanctuary, a place where you remember that your truth, your tenderness, your presence still matter in ways you've forgotten to honor. Before we begin, I want to thank you for sharing this space of reflection. If these words resonate, let them ripple outward. Like, share, or subscribe only if it feels natural to you. Only if this message nurtures something real inside your heart. Because this journey isn't about numbers, it's about connection. It's about bringing you home to what you're close to losing, without even realizing it. Gate 1. What your spirit has been trying to show you, Sagittarius. The truth that rises at the threshold of this first gate is simple, yet profound. You are drifting away from something that once grounded you, something that once offered you tenderness, stability, and meaning. And it isn't happening dramatically. It's happening quietly, subtly, in the spaces where your mind is overwhelmed and your heart is tired. You, more than any sign, live with a deep yearning for expansion, discovery, and purpose. You thrive when life feels wide, open, and filled with possibility. Yet somewhere along the way, the weight of obligation has begun to eclipse the horizon you once chased so freely. In tending to everyone else's needs, you've slowly stepped further and further away from your own truth. There is a pattern here, one that many Sagittarius women experience, especially in midlife. You've become the anchor, the reliable one, the emotional compass for those who depend on you. Children who still look to you for direction, parents who lean on your strength, partners or loved ones who rely on your optimism to pull them through difficult seasons. You've given so much that you no longer notice how thinly your energy has been stretched. And in this thinning, a sacred part of your life is being overlooked. Something that cannot survive without your conscious presence. Perhaps it is a relationship that once felt effortless, but now moves through your life like a quiet shadow. Still there, still waiting, but fading in warmth because you've been too exhausted to tend to it. I recall a woman in her late 40s who once shared with me how years of caregiving pulled her away from her marriage without her noticing. There was no betrayal, no dramatic fight, no rupture. Just a slow, unconscious retreat. She believed she would re-engage when life calmed down. But life didn't calm down. She simply kept postponing her presence. By the time she turned toward her partner again, he had learned to live without her emotional closeness. She hadn't meant to lose the relationship, but loss does not always arrive with a crash. Sometimes it arrives with silence. Or perhaps the precious thing slipping from your hands is your own inner flame. The spark that once guided your choices, inspired your dreams, and fueled the sense of authentic purpose you've always carried like an inner compass. Sagittarius women often mask their fading joy behind competence, humor, and resilience. They keep moving, pushing, caregiving, organizing, surviving. They tell themselves they'll circle back to the projects that once made their souls vibrate. The book they wanted to write, the spiritual journey they promised themselves, the creative expression they once loved. But the circle never completes because they're too busy holding the world together for everyone but themselves. This is where self-silencing becomes dangerous. When a woman spends too long prioritizing others over her own voice, the voice does not disappear. But it does become faint, like a candle flickering in a room full of wind. And if she waits too long, she loses the ability to hear herself at all. You know this tension well. You've felt it in quiet moments, those rare pockets of silence when the thought arises, I'm losing something and I don't know what it is. You may brush it aside, assuming it's stress or exhaustion. But that ache is your spirit navigating through layers of responsibility and whispering, return, reclaim, remember. Let me offer you another example, this one from a client who was a lifelong Sagittarius. She spent her 40s and early 50s raising 2 children, supporting her aging parents, and working a demanding job. She had always dreamed of traveling the world, studying spiritual traditions, writing her own memoir. She believed there would be a later for all of that. But later kept moving further away. Her children grew up, her parents passed, and suddenly she stood in a quiet home with a suitcase that had never been opened. When she finally went on her first solo trip and sat in a small cafe overlooking a river in Portugal, she cried, not from joy but from grief. She realized she had lost a decade of her own soul's expansion, not because she chose to, but because she forgot to choose differently. Sagittarius, the precious thing you are losing might not be a person. It might be time. It might be your creative rhythm. It might be your intuitive wisdom that once guided you so confidently. It might even be your sense of self, your real, raw, unguarded essence. The one who once believed she deserved to feel alive. And yet, something else is happening at the deeper level of Gate 1. You're receiving signals, both subtle and loud, nudging you to pay attention. The sudden heaviness that appears at night when you're finally alone. The strange emotional fog that drifts over you when you're doing something routine. The pang of longing that hits when you see someone else living a life that resembles the one you once imagined. These are not random feelings. They are the soul's alarm bells. At times, your dreams may even echo the urgency. You may find yourself searching for something in your sleep. An object, a person, a direction, but never finding it. This is the psyche's way of showing you what is unfolding internally. A loss that hasn't fully happened yet, but will, if you do nothing. And then there is the emotional numbness so many Sagittarius women describe. A sense of being fine on the outside but hollow on the inside. Numbness is not peace. It is the soul protecting itself from a truth you are not fully facing. That truth, most often, is that something essential to your well-being is drifting further away from you each day. You are not failing. You are not careless. You are simply overwhelmed by life's demands. But awareness is arriving now, and awareness is grace. At this gate, the first step is recognition. To gently but firmly acknowledge that something precious is slipping. To name it, not with panic but with presence. And to remember that nothing is truly lost if you wake up in time to hold it again with your full heart. When you're ready, I will guide you to Gate 2, where we look deeper into why this loss began, and how to reclaim what your soul has been quietly calling back to you. Gate 2. The root of the loss. How you began drifting away. Sagittarius, as we step into Gate 2, we move from awareness into understanding, from sensing the loss to tracing its origin. Because nothing precious slips away without a cause, even if the cause unfolds in subtle, unintentional ways. And for you, the beginning of this drift wasn't a single moment, but a slow accumulation of emotional weight. A layering of responsibilities, expectations, and quiet sacrifices that built themselves into a wall between you and what your soul once held dear. The truth is this: Sagittarius women in midlife often underestimate how much they carry. There is a cultural myth that your fire, optimism, and adventurous spirit make you naturally resilient, naturally capable, naturally able to endure. And while your spirit is indeed powerful, it is not boundless. You were not meant to stretch yourself to the point where your inner world becomes thin and brittle. But that is what happens when you spend years being the problem solver, the mediator, the listener, the emotional anchor, the schedule keeper, the crisis manager, the silent pillar everyone leans on. The drift began the first time you told yourself, "I'll deal with my feelings later." The first time you postponed your dreams because someone else needed you. The first time you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. None of these moments felt significant alone, but together they created the distance that now threatens something precious in your life. Let me give you a real example. One that mirrors the stories of many Sagittarius women I've met. A client of mine, a woman named Alina, spent years caring for her aging mother while managing a demanding job and raising a teenager. She loved deeply, gave generously, and rarely complained. But every time she felt overwhelmed, she brushed it aside. She convinced herself that being strong meant pushing her needs to the background. Over time, her laughter grew quieter, her passions faded, and the spontaneous fire that once defined her shrank to a small, flickering ember. She didn't notice the drift because she believed she was simply doing what needed to be done. But one day when her daughter asked, "Mom, when's the last time you were truly happy?" She couldn't answer. She realized she had been losing herself in slow motion. Sagittarius, this is the root of your drift too. A gradual disconnect from your own inner landscape. You've been functioning on autopilot, responding to external demands while muting your internal desires. You've told yourself you need to be strong, composed, reliable, that your vulnerability can wait. But the soul does not wait quietly. When ignored, it begins to withdraw. And when your soul withdraws, your life begins to lose color, meaning, and emotional resonance. There is also another layer to your drift: the fear of disappointing others. You may not admit it openly, but you often carry a deep, unseen fear of letting people down. You want to be the one who shows up, the one who saves the day, the one who knows the answers, the one who keeps moving forward even when you feel the tremble beneath your feet. And so instead of saying, "I need help," you say, "I'm fine." Instead of slowing down, you push harder. Instead of opening up, you armor yourself with humor, independence, or silence. This emotional self-containment may look strong from the outside, but inwardly it creates isolation. A loneliness that slowly erodes your ability to connect deeply with others and with yourself. And this loneliness often becomes the silent force that pushes the precious thing away. Not because you want to lose it, but because you've forgotten how to be fully present with it. Another seed of this drift lies in the tension between your nature and your reality. Sagittarius energy is built for freedom, change, and expansion. But midlife often brings stability, routines, and limitations, some chosen, some imposed. There is a quiet grief that many Sagittarius women experience when their lives no longer mirror their inner compass. You might find yourself missing who you used to be, longing for a version of yourself that felt more alive, creative, spontaneous, unburdened. And when this longing goes unexpressed, it turns inward and begins to dull your connection to the present moment. You begin drifting not because you don't care, but because your soul feels out of place, as though your life no longer reflects your truth. There's also the pressure of perfection, the belief that you need to present a certain image to the world. Sagittarius women often feel the need to appear strong, composed, wise, and endlessly capable. But this image becomes a shield, one that blocks others from seeing your authentic heart. Over time, this facade creates distance in relationships. People love you, but they love the version they can see, not the one you keep hidden. Slowly, quietly, this leads to emotional disconnection. And that disconnection is often at the root of what you fear losing now. And we must speak about pride. Not egoistic pride, but the pride that Sagittarius develops from being self-reliant. You're used to navigating life alone, trusting your instincts, solving problems without guidance. This self-reliance is beautiful, but it also means you struggle to admit when something is wrong. You don't ask for help until the situation becomes unbearable. You don't express your fears until you're on the edge of collapse. You don't open your heart until the distance feels irreversible. And sometimes by the time you reach out, the precious thing, whether a relationship, an opportunity, or a part of yourself, has already begun to slip beyond your reach. Sagittarius, none of this is your fault. You were never taught how to balance expansion with responsibility, how to explore while caring for others, how to remain true to yourself while surviving the demands of midlife. No one prepared you for this emotional tightrope. You've been navigating it blindly, doing the best you can with the tools you have. But understanding the drift gives you power. Awareness sharpens your vision. You can reclaim what is slipping away. You can draw closer to what you've unintentionally distanced yourself from. You can choose differently now, in ways your past self didn't know how to. Gate 2 is about truth, but Gate 3 is about healing. It is where we explore how to turn back toward what matters, how to restore your presence, how to reconnect with what your heart has been missing, and how to prevent this slow emotional loss from becoming permanent. Gate 3, how to turn back toward what matters. Sagittarius. Now that you've seen the drift for what it truly is, this gate becomes a sacred turning point. Gate 3 is not about blame or regret. It is about return. A return to presence, to connection, to your inner flame, to the precious thing that has been slipping away. Every soul reaches a moment where it must choose to come home to itself again. This is yours. Healing begins not with action but with acknowledgement. The most courageous thing you can do right now is to admit where you have been emotionally absent. To say softly without judgment, "I see where I stepped away." Admitting this doesn't make you weak. It makes you awake. And awakening is always the first step toward reclaiming anything precious. Let us begin with the simplest truth. You must slow down. Sagittarius energy operates at a gallop. Your mind races ahead, your responsibilities pull you sideways, and your worries press from behind. But to reconnect with what matters, you must stop moving long enough to actually feel. Presence can only find you when you stop outrunning yourself. Many Sagittarius women in midlife have forgotten how to sit still with their own hearts. They know how to solve problems, soothe others, adjust to crises, and keep moving. But they don't know how to pause long enough to hear what their spirit has been trying to whisper for years. I once worked with a Sagittarius woman named Claire. She spent her days in a blur: work, appointments, caregiving, errands, emotional labor that no one saw. When she finally learned to take 10 quiet minutes each night to sit in stillness, no phone, no noise, no responsibilities, the first thing she felt was grief. Old, unprocessed grief that had been waiting for her attention. The second thing she felt was memory. A memory of who she used to be before life became a list of obligations. That tiny practice of stillness became her first step back to herself. It softened her, then clarified her, and eventually changed everything. This is what you must relearn too. Presence is a muscle that strengthens when used. And without it, you cannot hold on to what is slipping away. Whether the precious thing is a relationship, an opportunity, or your own inner fire, it needs your presence, not your performance, not your strength, not your perfection. Your presence. Another essential piece of turning back is vulnerability. Sagittarius women often struggle with emotional openness. Not because you're cold, but because you're protective. You have learned to equate vulnerability with danger, with exposure, with the possibility of being misunderstood or rejected. But the truth is that nothing meaningful can survive without vulnerability. Not love, not connection, not creativity, not purpose. You must be willing to be seen again, not just the capable version of you, but the human one. In my sessions, there was a Sagittarius woman named Miriam who had spent years building an armor of competence around herself. To her family and friends, she appeared strong, composed, endlessly capable. But beneath that armor, she felt invisible and disconnected. One day, she finally told her partner, "I don't feel like myself anymore, and I don't know how to fix it." That one moment, her first genuine admission of fear, shifted the entire dynamic of their relationship. He had sensed her distance but didn't know how to reach her. Her vulnerability became an invitation, a bridge back to closeness. Within months, their relationship felt warmer, deeper, more alive than it had in years. Not because she became more perfect, but because she became more real. Sagittarius, you too must allow someone to meet you where you truly are, not where you pretend to be. This is how you reclaim the precious connection that has been drifting, by showing up not as the protector or performer, but as yourself. Another part of this turning back is expression, returning to the truths you've silenced. Sagittarius thrives on truth-telling, on emotional honesty, on speaking from the heart. But over time, you've muted yourself. You've avoided difficult conversations because you didn't want to create conflict. You've held back your needs because you didn't want to burden others. You've swallowed your emotions because there wasn't time to feel them. But expression is your path back. You cannot reclaim what you've lost while staying silent. This doesn't mean dramatic declarations. It means simple, grounded truths like, "I miss us. I've been overwhelmed lately. I feel disconnected from myself. I want to rebuild what we're losing." Expressions like these open doors that have been closed for too long. Next comes reconnection, an intentional turning toward the person, purpose, or dream that has gone dim. If it is a person, initiate moments of real presence, not grand gestures. Something as simple as sitting beside them without distractions, listening without planning your response, asking questions with curiosity instead of obligation. Connection is built in the small moments, the quiet gestures, the softening of your attention. A Sagittarius woman I worked with rebuilt her relationship with her daughter by spending 15 minutes each night doing nothing but talking with her. No advice, no multitasking, no correcting, just presence. Within weeks, the emotional distance was replaced by warmth. If what you're losing is your purpose or creative spark, the reconnection must be intentional too. Return to the small practices that once brought you alive. Writing a paragraph, lighting a candle before meditation, going on a quiet walk at sunrise, picking up the guitar collecting dust in the corner. Your inner flame doesn't reignite through pressure. It rekindles through tenderness. And if what you're losing is yourself, your identity, your inner truth, your sense of direction, then the reconnection begins with permission. Permission to feel again. Permission to rest. Permission to admit you're tired. Permission to want more. Permission to choose yourself without guilt. The healing of Gate 3 also requires remembering that you are allowed to ask for help. Sagittarius women struggle deeply with this. They fear being a burden, being vulnerable, being perceived as weak. But asking for help is not a collapse. It is an act of strength, a declaration that you deserve support too. Let someone in. Whether it's a partner, a sibling, a friend, or a therapist, let them carry even a small part of the weight you've been holding alone. And finally, there is forgiveness, the balm that allows you to move forward without carrying guilt. Forgive yourself for drifting away when you didn't know any better. Forgive yourself for being overwhelmed. Forgive yourself for the silence, the distance, the exhaustion. You are human, tender, and doing the best you can beneath the weight of expectations no one else fully sees. Forgiveness is not a reward. It is a reclaiming of your power. Sagittarius, Gate 3 is where you stop running, where you turn around and face what matters, where you choose presence over distraction, vulnerability over protection, truth over silence, reconnection over distance. And this choice, when made consistently, has the power to pull the precious thing back into your life before it slips too far. Gate 4. The transformation, becoming the guardian of what matters. Sagittarius, Gate 4 is where the journey turns from healing into transformation. This gate asks you not only to reclaim what has been slipping away, but to become the protector of it, to nurture it, to honor it, to grow with it. If Gate 3 is the moment you turn back toward what matters, Gate 4 is the moment you vow not to lose it again. Transformation is not dramatic. It's not a sudden breakthrough or a lightning strike of clarity. It is subtle, patient, deeply rooted in quiet choices that accumulate into a life lived differently. And this is where your fire begins to rise again. Not as a blaze that burns everything around you, but as a steady flame that warms, guides, and illuminates. The first step of this transformation is consistency. Something Sagittarius often struggles with because your heart moves with passion, spontaneity, and inspiration. But what matters most in midlife is not the power of intensity. It is the power of devotion. To the people you love, to the dreams you carry, to yourself. The precious thing you almost lost begins to stabilize only when you show up for it over and over again, even on days when the spark feels faint. I once worked with a Sagittarius woman named Helena, who nearly lost her marriage because she had become emotionally distant without realizing it. After confronting the truth, she didn't promise dramatic changes. She simply chose one consistent action. Each morning, she placed her hand on her husband's chest for 10 seconds before getting out of bed, grounding them both. It was small, almost insignificant, but that simple gesture softened her defenses, rebuilt intimacy, and reminded both of them that connection doesn't return through grand declarations. It returns through steady presence. You too must anchor your transformation through the small, the stable, the reliable. If you are reclaiming a relationship, let your presence be felt in simple ways. If you are reclaiming a dream, dedicate even 10 minutes a day to it. If you are reclaiming yourself, create rituals that nourish your inner world. Transformation is built in these tiny stitches. The second step is transparency. Sagittarius thrives on truth, but the truth you often share is external. Your insights, your beliefs, your philosophies. The truth that transforms you is the inner truth. The soft underbelly of your heart, the fears you've hidden, the desires you've buried, the longings you've silenced, the precious connection you almost lost, whether with a person or with yourself, can only thrive if transparency becomes your new language. Not constant confession, but honest presence. I remember guiding a client, a Sagittarius mother in her early 50s, through a difficult reconnection with her adult son. She had spent years being strong, offering advice, providing solutions, trying to shield him from her vulnerabilities. One day during a phone call, she said something she had never said before. I miss you. Not the role you play, not the updates you give me. I miss your heart. Her son later told her it was the first time he felt truly invited back into her emotional world. That moment didn't fix everything, but it opened a door that had been locked for years. Transparency creates openings where distance once grew. The third step is learning to stay emotionally present, when things become uncomfortable. Sagittarius often withdraws or distracts themselves when tensions rise. Not out of fear, but out of a deep desire to protect their own spirit from heaviness. But the precious thing you almost lost requires staying present, even when it feels vulnerable. Staying in the conversation instead of shutting down. Staying with your feelings instead of numbing. Staying connected instead of escaping into busyness or avoidance. Transformation demands emotional endurance, the ability to stay open long enough for healing to happen. Another essential part of Gate 4 is rebalancing your life between giving and receiving. Sagittarius women are natural givers. You give guidance, energy, solutions, emotional strength, optimism. But the imbalance comes when you neglect your own need to receive. Receiving is not selfish. It is fuel. Without it, you become exhausted, resentful, disconnected, and empty. To protect what matters, you must learn to receive love, support, affection, forgiveness, help. You must let yourself be held, not just hold others. When you allow yourself to receive, you restore the energy that keeps your connections alive. Then comes the need to reimagine freedom. Sagittarius associates freedom with movement, exploration, escape. But midlife demands a new understanding. Freedom is not leaving. It is staying fully present while being fully yourself. Freedom is emotional authenticity. Freedom is expressing your needs without guilt. Freedom is loving without losing yourself. Freedom is telling the truth instead of pretending. Freedom is choosing presence over perfection. One Sagittarius woman I supported redefined freedom by setting a boundary with her siblings who relied heavily on her for caregiving. She didn't abandon them. She simply said, "I love you, but I need time for myself too." That single boundary restored her sense of self and improved her family's dynamics because she showed up from a place of fullness, not depletion. Gate 4 is also about protection, not defensive protection but sacred stewardship. Once you reclaim the precious thing slipping away, you must become its guardian. You protect the connection by nurturing it. You protect the dream by prioritizing it. You protect yourself by honoring your limits. And you protect your soul by refusing to abandon your truth again. The transformation deepens when you let go of the illusion that there will be a better time to be present. Time is never paused. The relationships you cherish need you now. Your dreams need you now. Your inner self needs you now. You cannot wait for circumstances to improve before choosing what matters. You must choose it now, within the imperfection, within the chaos, within the overwhelming days. That is how transformation becomes real. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Gate 4 asks you to choose love, imperfect, vulnerable, present love. Love for others. Love for your purpose. Love for your life. Love for yourself. Love becomes the anchor that prevents another drift. Love becomes the compass that directs your attention. Love becomes the reminder that what you almost lost is worth tending every single day. Sagittarius, you are not returning to who you were before the drift. You are transforming into someone wiser, softer, and more deeply connected. Someone who knows how to protect what matters because she has felt the pain of almost losing it. Conclusion: gathering the threads, claiming the moment. Sagittarius, as we arrive at the final gate of this journey, let us pause together in the soft light of everything you've remembered, reclaimed, and awakened within yourself. You've walked through awareness, truth, healing, and transformation. You've faced the quiet ache of what you were losing and found the courage to turn back toward it with open hands and an honest heart. This is not just a conclusion. It is a homecoming. The precious thing slipping away was never meant to be lost, only rediscovered with deeper reverence. And now you see it clearly. Your presence matters. Your truth matters. Your softness matters. The people who love you deserve the real you, not the weary shadow of someone stretched thin by responsibility. And you, in turn, deserve the connection, meaning, and vibrancy that come when you choose to show up fully for your life. Sagittarius, this is your moment to claim your power, not through performance, but through presence. To protect what is sacred, not through force, but through devotion. To rebuild your inner fire, not through striving, but through gentle tending. You have not missed your chance. You have caught it in time. And now you get to choose differently. If this journey has touched something inside you, if it has helped you see yourself with softer eyes, or reminded you of what you still have time to save, consider staying close. Like, share, or subscribe only if it feels aligned. only if this space continues to nurture your unfolding. Your engagement is not just an action. It is an energetic affirmation that you are choosing awareness over autopilot, connection over distance, presence over absence. You are here, Sagittarius, awake, aware, ready to honor what truly matters before it ever slips away again. And your story from this moment on will be written from a place of deeper truth, deeper love, and deeper courage.